All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials World podcast. And Brian, I've been thinking, right? I was on YouTube recently and I saw a 10-year-old clip from our favorite talk show host, Jimmy Kimmel. And he told me and told the entire audience that watching people play video games on the internet is fucking stupid. Would you agree with that, Brian? It's for nerds and incels and just general fucking losers. Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's probably the most correct opinion that Kimmel has had since his days on The Man Show, when he often said correct things. Who would seek out information about video games? Other people playing video games? I mean, obviously, that's pitiful. You can play the game yourself. I wouldn't want to live in a world where watching another person play a video game or discuss a video game was a form of entertainment. It's kind of dystopian, right?
No, it absolutely is. I mean, as we all know, right? Like, people don't listen to music. They just play music. People don't watch football or basketball or baseball on TV. They just play the sports. Like, can you imagine watching or listening to people make art and do fucking activities? That's such a fucking stupid idea. I can't even fathom that possibility.
Especially a video game. The thing that famously smells bad, Doritos much.
No, exactly. I mean, Brian, I think you and I should talk a little bit about the early history of people playing games and showing it on the internet, that fucking loser activity that both you and I never engaged in, right? You think that would be a good topic to have for this show?
Well, I mean, it is going to flare up a little bit of my 1,000-yard stare, pretty foundational part of my time online. But yeah, fuck it. Let's do it. Let's talk about Let's Plays. Danced around it for, 3 years now?
No, absolutely. So without further ado, we will talk about the early history of Let's Plays. So let's get into it. Before we get into it, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational, Cringe Millennial Moment of the Week.
Of when? Of the week?
Woo! Yeah! And unlike usual, I didn't ask what you wanted to cover for this week, so I'm going in completely blind. Brian, what do you want to talk about for this week's topic here?
So there's a lot of different potential subjects we could have for this. And as I was going through sort of our options, the thing that really struck me, instead of picking a single cringe topic, is more like, because you might not listeners may not understand, because Let's Plays are still pretty popular, but they aren't really popular the way they were in the 2010s, I would argue. There was a moment where they were extremely mainstream and they were a very distinct form of online content. What I'd like to underscore in our generational segment is how many extremely mainstream people you see weekly or potentially daily basis who have a direct line to this era of playing video games online and talking about them. That would be people like Mr. Beast, or even Lolcows, who you probably don't even know did Let's Plays. People like Only Use Me Blade, who you might see on TikTok just being a degenerate, was a popular Let's Player. Destiny, one of the first professional video game streamers, which makes sense because it explains where he got a lot of his political bona fides. So this was a moment that, as much as it is Kimmel's being kind of a boomer about it, but it is kind of a silly thing. It's kind of a nerdy, fun, childlike community building thing. But there is a direct line to this early day of Let's Play and most very popular forms of content you see now. That goes for debate streamers. That has a direct line from Let's Plays. Video essays, maybe not to the extent that they're influenced by people like James Rolfe, are tied pretty closely with this early era of Let's Plays. So as much as it, when it came out, seemed like such a niche thing, it's kind of one of the pillars of the modern internet, is this whole thing that comes out of a community of people not just playing video games, but showing off video games and talking about them and kind of pairing the game with a persona. So it is absolutely, funny enough, responsible for a lot of the modern, extremely mainstream and extremely corporate now internet.
No, absolutely. And if you want to talk about, I guess, a topic for this week before we get into the actual history of it, how about, Brian, I nominate Chris Chan's Let's Plays, because many people don't know, and we're not going to cover, obviously, this early history of Let's Plays, but Chris Chan is arguably the first Let's Player. That's not even a joke. Yeah. I know we've mentioned that on a previous episode, but he legitimately made videos of him playing video games in 2000 or 2001. He did this on fucking VHS tapes that he sends out to his gal pals and made for his mom and dad. That's how early this shit was.
Yeah, there is kind of a ground zero of Let's Plays. Chris Chan is the person that was right there just a few years before Let's Play became a genre online. There are a few people, the musician Weird Paul, who obsessively reviewed and filmed all of his pop culture stuff from his early childhood to the present day. He filmed himself playing Atari and Nintendo games as a kid in the 80s and provided commentary that are essentially Let's Plays. But the difference being that I don't think he had any intention to share that or to publicize. That was just a personal thing he did. Chris Chan, though, did actively create where he filmed himself playing a video game and gave his understanding of that video game and his opinions on it with the intent to distribute that as content, which also says something about how much of a narcissist Chris was, that he thought there'd be any audience for that years before it was something anyone was thinking about doing.
To be fair, just to give a little bit of quick context, so, I mean, everybody in the fucking internet knows who Chris Chan is. I don't want to be redundant in explaining who Chris Chan is. Just look up their name. Trust me, you've heard of Chris Chan. But Chris Chan originally made their Let's Plays as, I believe, an anniversary present to his parents, if I'm not mistaken. And to be fair, what he was doing at the time was genuinely really sweet and cute. Obviously, a 19, 20-year-old doing that is a little odd, but at the same time, of course, he is developmentally challenged and developmentally delayed. But at the same time, it is sweet, it is adorable. And, you know, talk about how there was an audience for it. It literally did end up in Nintendo Power, so clearly there was an interest in it at a fairly early age. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was an actual, like, blurb about it in an issue of Nintendo Power, so clearly they thought it was cute and interesting.
But even in making it to Nintendo Power, it kind of shows the dearth still, in a lot of ways, of user-created video game content at that time, which was going to rapidly change over the next few years. Because, of course, that was of interest to Nintendo Power, because nobody else had thought to do that. Because as people like Jimmy Kimmel pointed out, and in fact, as a lot of people on the forums where Let's Plays originated, people that weren't into it were immediately put off by it. Were immediately like, this is the stupidest thing. Why would you ever do it? And I think that was the conceit for a few years. That's kind of why, like, obviously there's probably like home videos of people filming themselves playing arcade cabinets and getting a high score and things. But it was seen, I think, as an extremely niche personal hobby until suddenly in the mid-2000s it wasn't.
Oh, yes. Actually, to be fair, this is a little bit of a preamble even before we get to our history of the modern mainstream era of Let's Plays. So talk about how filming like arcade cabinets. So for example, the professional fighting game community really got started in the mid to late 90s. And there are, you know, talk about videos on VHS of people like Alex Valle and Daigo and stuff like that playing Street Fighter games in like the late 90s and early 2000s, which I would argue is kind of adjacent to proto Let's Playing because of people playing
video games. Absolutely is.
But in that way, of course, it was competitive. It wasn't just necessarily somebody commentating over video games of one person playing. It was somebody commentating over two different people in a competitive environment. So it is adjacent to it. So I think that's something to bring up as well, because the fighting game community arguably has a longer history than the Let's Play community, but it is still niche in comparison to Let's Plays, even though talk about StarCraft and the professional, like South Korea level of like online gaming community stuff is of course extremely mainstream in South Korea, but it's of course way less mainstream here. But at the same time, it is very much niche in comparison to Let's Plays, at least in America, for sure.
I guess the point really to take from this proto era, which can basically be anywhere from birth of the home video game console up to the onset of the Let's Play as we know it, is that these things were floating around. Obviously, there have always been people that love video games. There's going to be people making VHS tapes, reviews, home video projects. I think the difference is that at some point, as the internet became, you know, a little more populous, a little more commonplace, there was an idea of, nobody used this word back then, but at some point there was an idea that, you know, you could make content. And really the best way I think to look at it, at least in this first era, is it's like a crude video essay in a lot of ways. It's like, you would never do this now, but typically the point of like the first Let's Play, right, it was to show something off about your skill set, or show something off about technology or game concept that a lot of people might not know. So as the internet becomes more popular, there's a group of people who are like, oh, I actually have something to say about these games that I think is interesting enough or, you know, distinct enough that I want to show it off to other people. And that's a pretty big sea change from even like competitive fighting VHS tapes or like home videos, which are, you know, documentation, right? This is the beginning of inserting yourself into it to a much lesser degree than would happen later on.
No, absolutely. And I think without further ado, let's get into the very early history of Let's Plays. So the person who came up with the term of Let's Play specifically, I believe, was Slow Beef. Is that correct?
Not exactly. So just going to real fast go through here. I've mentioned Something Awful several times on the show. A lot to go into, but on the general gaming forum, someone made a text-based thing that they called Let's Play. I believe the first one ever was called Let's Play Oregon Trail. Now, this was not video. This was screen caps and text. And, you know, people would interact with it throughout the thread, and someone would go, oh, here's some funny, less famous things from Oregon Trail you might not know. And they kind of, mid-2000s, it was kind of a comedy writing exercise. But it did involve showing off the game and things. And then people sort of, like, you know, this is a very nerdy group of people that are on Something Awful all the time. They start going, oh, I want to show off this really obscure game or this game I'm really good at. And so people are doing what they call Let's Plays, but they're text and screen capture based. At some point, point, though, a member of Something Awful known as Slow Beef, who becomes important in this era of Let's Plays, he has a game he wants to show off called The Immortal. It's a top-down RPG / kind of adventure point-and-click game for the Sega Genesis. There's mechanics in there, and there's images and visuals that Slow Beef doesn't think he can explain through text. He needs you to be able to see it to understand how the game works. And while this is going on, Slow Beef is in school studying at a pretty advanced level for like coding and game design and all these things. So this is like his hobby, but this is also like what he's training himself in. And he uses a capture card and does a very concise run through of this game, The Immortal. And then in post, he records audio where he does kind of a walkthrough. It's not comedic. And he puts it on the general forum and people love it because he'd taken the time to put effort into it. People on the forum love it. And then other people start doing similar things. And pretty quickly, there's just a lot of these new Let's Play things. And some of them really suck and some are really good. And some of the games mods are like, we need to make a forum for this. And they all think it's weird and stupid. It's a subgroup within the subgroup of people that play video games within Something Awful. So they're kind of like, even with the video game people on the forum, they're kind of losers. So they make a forum to kind of just shove them all away, which is what you used to do with Something Awful whenever there was a clique of people you didn't want to deal with. You just give them their own forum. And all the games mods go like, I don't really care about this. I don't understand it. Let's make Slowbeef mod because his video was good. And from there, this is when like Let's Play, because Let's Play was just like a fun name for your thread, right? It was a text-based thread and you go, let's play this. And then you show pictures from an old video game. But once it becomes a forum and Slowbeef is modding it, and there's some other games mods in there, Let's Play is now like a thing, at least within the context of the Something Awful forums. You want to show off this game, you have something to say about it, you're going to record yourself playing it well and correctly, and in post, you're going to record yourself discussing it. And you're going to have stuff to say, and you're going to be informative, and maybe you'll be kind of funny or entertaining. Very specifically, it's that. And again, it starts as a very niche thing, but then it blows up and it becomes like the most popular thing on the site.
Yeah, not only does it fucking blow up, but it also migrates to other video platforms, obviously most famously YouTube. And from there, just like with almost everything when it comes to a niche hobby that was very specialized to a certain extent, it gets dumbed down significantly for YouTube. And you start getting into, obviously there's some golden era stuff when it comes to this, but a lot of it is just unwatchable garbage. And not only does it come from the fact it's unwatchable garbage because a lot of the commentary isn't very interesting, but also on top of it, the video quality is fucking terrible if there is a capture card. But let's be honest, most of the time people didn't want to pay for a capture card because capture cards were not super expensive, but fairly expensive for like teenagers doing a fucking hobby on the internet. So what they did was they would just get a camcorder and film the TV that they were playing the game of and just talk over it. And it's a disaster. It's always a fucking disaster. I would argue the person who did that best was DSP, but at the same time, DSP is infamously terrible at Let's Plays, so that's not much of a ringing endorsement. So the camcorder rip LP is, I think, a very infamous era of the LP genre. Brian, do you have anything to comment on, or am I pretty much accurate on that?
That is accurate. I have a little bit of kind of like texture to add to that. Let's Play moving over. It's because Slowbeef and some of the other Let's Play mods, they run a pretty tight ship. Slowbeef, with some consulting, he makes a master list of rules. They're just like guidelines to ensure that video is quality, that picture quality is good, that you have something to say, that you're not being too obnoxious. And in his opinion, and this is central to this kind of era of Let's Play, that you're centering the game over your personality. And what happens, so kind of a higher standard of quality, people just come on, they don't look at the rules, or they don't understand that Something Awful is heavily moderated, because most of the internet wasn't at that point, and they post their camcorder video. Or they just post a video of them being what we would now call cringe, and they get dunked on, and then their thread gets closed, because it sucks. Because it's taking up space, and there's people here that want to make good stuff. A lot of these people move over to YouTube. But also, and I think this is what really makes it blow up, some really good early Let's Players who just, they're maybe a little too wholesome for the Something Awful vibe. Although Slowbeef was a pretty wholesome guy, as I recall. But so you got people like Deceased Crab and Proton John, who were like goofy, but they did pretty good Let's Plays. But they got made fun of by Slowbeef and his kind of clique a little bit early on when they were all friends. And Proton John moves to YouTube, and he's doing, first of all, he's just a very likable, soft-spoken, nerdy guy that knows a lot about video game history. Also, he only plays Mario games, basically. So he blows up because he's just a nice, likable guy. He's kind of leaving Something Awful for YouTube. And he gets a million people that see him and go, I could do that, because he makes it look easy. And from there, you've got camcorder people who got kicked out of Something Awful. But you've also just got your people that want to be Proton John, right? So there's a million people playing shitty Mario ROM hacks and dying over and over again, not having good commentary. And it becomes like a really big thing on YouTube. By like 2008, you can't really go on YouTube without being shown shown a video of like a 10-year-old point their camcorder at like a blurry image of Star Fox and crying when they lose over and over.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things where obviously talk about the poor quality LPers. Like, obviously, as we talked, or as you just talked about with like, Slow Beef and Proton John. And I remember Red Supre made fun of Billy MC a lot because, his mom bought him McDonald's for Christmas or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, obviously.
But yeah, but we love Billy. Everyone loves Billy.
Oh, for sure. And obviously there were plenty of people that, talk about, and this is definitely a part of the topic we're going to get to at some point, but Red Supre, like, a lot of the people Red Supre made fun of, like, I do like a lot of those people that they made fun of. Not all of them, obviously. A lot of them are scumbags. Like, of course, DSP is a fucking scumbag. But at the same time, like, I think what's interesting about the camcorder element is that even though the vast majority, the near unanimity of camcorder LPers were awful, but, like, it is one of those things where just, like, early angry video game reviewers, they're not only, obviously, it's a very DIY thing, but a lot of them are also kids, so I can't really be too mad about them being fucking annoying about it. Now, granted, if you're a DSP and you're in your 40s in your fucking fail condo, still doing what you're doing today, then grow the fuck up. Or, obviously, Dalawan Sparrow, otherwise known as Low Tier God, still doing that shit. That shit fucking blows. But at the same time, like I said, it's mostly kids having fun and dicking around. And, at some point, if they were to have actually gotten a capture card or put a little bit more effort into it, or even, frankly, got better commentary, it would be fine. But, I think a lot of the negativity when it came to Let's Plays and its poor reputation just came from the fact that a lot of the either commentary or the reactions were so based. And not based in like I'm so awesome. Based in like the most like caveman-esque shit. It would just be like you dying a million times and you going like, oh, and like screaming and crying and using compound swears that like Tom Jorgensen would cringe at. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was horrible. Some of the dumbest shit ever. Like, and of course, a lot of those people are just ripping off AVGN, which in hindsight, a lot of that stuff hasn't aged super duper well. But at the same time, James was also pioneering that and also was by far the best at it.
We love him. This is a pro James Rolfe podcast.
Oh, absolutely. We are absolutely James Rolfe defenders. Absolutely. But yeah, a lot of this early LP stuff and like a lot of the big people that are still celebrities to this day in the online space were some of the people making the most based garbage content. Like awful bullshit. Like, of course, fucking, and I just saw his movie like literally 2 days ago, but Markiplier did that stupid shit. PewDiePie infamously did that stupid shit. I genuinely don't know how PewDiePie was able to survive with any kind of positive reputation intact with how awful his early content was. It was awful. Like unwatchable garbage.
Well, and that's one of the things is we're kind of, I guess, leading up, not to totally center it around like the SA click or whatever. So like as the YouTube stuff starts getting flooded with all this garbage, Slow Beef and some of the other people from Something Awful, they start this project called Red Supre. And this is important to the overall history of Let's Play in kind of a way that's different than you might expect. So bear with me for a moment. Baked into the identity of Something Awful is an obsession with Mystery Science Theater 3000. Basically across the site, it is a foundational text for, I think, just about everyone that posted on there in the 2000s. And Red Supre was just Something Awful Let's Players who were pretty funny and knew quite a bit about video games, riffing like Mystery Science Theater style over bad Let's Plays. And they did that specifically on YouTube. Now, the point was not, and I believe this to be mean, it was, well, you made this thing, you wanted to put it out there, you wanted to express it. And the Red Supre thing, which is what they call it, it's a little problematic, right? It's kind of a Japanified version of saying Let's Play. Slow Beef has since claimed that that is not the case, but like, come on. So by doing these videos where they riff over bad Let's Plays, it kind of gives you an example, right? It gives them something they can show to people on the Something Awful forums, and people off of them that want to make good content go like, hey, here's some stuff not to do. But like, they have these rules that for me at the time, like I was a teenager and I was following these guys, I was on Something Awful. I thought, of course, these rules make perfect sense. Why wouldn't you want to follow them? Like, for instance, if you died over and over in a game, or you talked over the cutscenes, anything that didn't center showing off the game and showing off what was interesting or bad or weird about the game, Slow Beef would say, well, that's not a Let's Play. You're just playing a video game and filming it. But a Let's Play to Slow Beef, and this sounds so stupid now, was a specific thing. It was a specific, like, showing off the game in a high quality. And what's interesting is at the time, I think me and all my online friends and basically the whole clique, everyone that was into the Red Supre and Something Awful stuff, were like, yeah, of course, this is great. This is what they're going to take all these shitty people down and they're going to like kind of elevate this to something resembling an art form maybe. What actually happened is that they 100% lost in the struggle for the integrity of kids playing video games and filming it for the internet. Red Supre and the Something Awful LP moderators, they absolutely lost because pretty immediately Let's Play came to just mean pretty much anyone filming themselves playing a video game. And I think that, which was shocking to me at the time, that's when it really got popular, right? That's when it became like a mainstream thing.
Well, yes, and obviously, as we said, the SA/Red Supre crew absolutely lost that battle. But the other thing that made early Let's Plays, talk about the, I guess, art form of it, right? And what really stopped LPs from becoming the like cultural juggernaut on the internet that it is today, and even out into the IRL space, I guess you could fucking say, for lack of a better word, is that back in the day, YouTube and other various video sharing platforms were just crippled by these giant multinational multimedia corporations like, Viacom and Universal and, all the other video game companies that just shit on small time creators. That's why, of course, AVGN early on, even though he got his start kind of on YouTube, although obviously he got the videotapes, traded with his friends, and then uploaded on his own website, and then created the James Nintendo Nerd and blah, blah, blah. We kind of got into it on the AVGN movie episode, but that's not here or there. But anyways, the early history of video creation content on the internet, especially when it came to video games and movies, when it came to reviewing and talking about them, anytime anything was released, these fucking companies would copyright strike them and take down this content. So for a long time, the Let's Play space and the just in general people playing video games on the internet or talking about them space was occupied by these, like, I think they're called multi-channel networks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And like Machinima and fucking Screw Attack and all these corporations that would basically go behind the scenes of all these giant corporations and be like, yo, just let us show shit on our website and on YouTube, and just please don't. We'll take our cut and give it back to you, and then we'll give the cut back to the creators. And for a long time, that created a little bit of a kind of professionalism to a certain degree, because a lot of these people weren't able to just show whatever the fuck they wanted or have whatever the fuck criticism or commentary. Right. And it gave a little bit of, like I said, quality to it, even outside of obviously the, slow beef Retsupre SA rules. But at the same time, once those corporations really started to, get their fucking necks off the heels of these small creators and YouTube became far more corporatized, that's when the floodgates happened. That's when the content just became really just completely interchangeable with everybody else. And whoever got started early on and had the largest fan base just fucking ran off with whatever. So that's why like fucking PewDiePie and Markiplier and some of the other big time creators who, I was shitting on PewDiePie and he fucking deserves it. But Markiplier, as far as I'm aware of, seems like a nice, fairly wholesome guy. So I don't want to be too shitty on him, but his content was also not very enjoyable in my opinion. But at the same time, like once those, multi-channel network companies really lost control of everything, that's when this shit just exploded in online space and everybody was doing Let's Plays. Like straight up, everybody was doing Let's Plays, for once again, better or worse. And there are still obviously channels and creators of Let's Plays that I still watch to this day, but like a lot of those early ones, like I said, outside of like Retsupre stuff, and I'll get into it later on in this episode, but like Two Best Friends Play and those various people and maybe a handful of other people from those eras, but otherwise pretty much all that shit is just so poorly aged in my opinion. But that's also a bit of the history I wanted to get to it on the early Let's Play segment of it. Was that something you were going to mention too, Brian?
Yeah, no, I think that is excellent context for this, because it kind of shows like once the floodgates kind of open on that, the barrier to entry closes. Like, I don't mean to sound anti-democratic about this, but part of the thing with not just with the Something Awful guys, but anyone that was on YouTube that was making good Let's Plays in the 2000s, in my opinion, good Let's Play, they were putting the game forward, they had high quality video, they had insightful commentary, is that they were probably pretty nerdy in a pretty traditional sense, right? They had the time and the knowledge to put that information in. The barrier to entry kind of lowers, and something like PewDiePie or Markiplier, and again, like you said, Markiplier seems nice. I don't want to dog him. And it's not about the game at all anymore. It's just about the personality, the yelling, the parasocial relationship with your 10-year-old audience, right? And then I remember when the scare cam shit started breaking up, which immediately was anathema to everything I liked about. What I liked about Retsupre, what I liked about Let's Plays on Something Awful, what I liked about the forum in general was that it kind of encouraged high quality creative thinking. So for me, everything I looked for on the internet at that time was basically shit we'd call try hard now, right? But when I see PewDiePie for the first time, I remember thinking shocked that anyone would watch it. And Retsupre are making fun of it. And I'm going, yeah, this guy sucks. This guy's going to be a fucking joke. People are going to remember Slow Beef and Diabetes forever. I was working at Kmart at the time, Taylor. This is when we lived together. This PewDiePie had been blowing up for a while. So I worked at this Kmart with people who are about my age, and they're like super normies. They're like very not online, and they're talking about PewDiePie to me. And I'm going, excuse me? And I said, like, do you watch that? And they're like, well, yeah, it's funny. He streamed, or they said one of his catchphrases. And I was kind of like, in my head, I was like resisting the urge to tell them all about like Let's Play history and why that's not a real Let's Play and why you should watch the Jurassic Park Trespasser Let's Play by Research Indicates instead. There was this thing where I watched this shift happen, where I was there at the time the shift happened, and I was so sure that this stuff was going to be defeated and crushed, and everyone was going to agree that this shit sucked, and that someday all of the Let's Plays, the type of Let's Play that I liked and recognized, was going to become like the default, that it was going to win out. because why wouldn't it? It seemed so much better to me. And by like 2015, I gotta say, I think that it had pretty much all moved over. So anyone that's still doing those traditional like rules-based game forward Let's Plays, instead of streaming and just engaging parasocially with their audience, they're making a conscious choice to do that, knowing that it probably will not get as popular as streaming and just talking casually with your audience. So streaming kind of replaced, scare cams replace the traditional Let's Play first, but as streaming gets more ubiquitous, it's all about streaming because it's less work for both the viewer and the Let's Player, right? It's just a stream. You're just kind of hanging out.
No, absolutely. And I think honestly, the, era of making Let's Plays and talking about obviously like, I don't know, the history of a video game or talking about the quirks of it or its influences or whatever. I think the reason that died out and the much more parasocial, like somebody is just playing a video game and you interact with them being like, oh no, I died or whatever. I think a lot of that, and I know maybe I'm reaching just a little bit here, so please stop me if I'm getting a little too existential, but I think the reason that happened, that shift, is just because people became more lonely and more isolated. It's kind of a consequence of the age of loneliness that we live in, because at the time, right, like when Let's Plays were first becoming a thing like 20-ish years ago, right, like people still, if they wanted to hang out, they would mostly fucking hang out with each other. They'd mostly go to their places.
Yeah.
They would play video games in a big circle with like 3 or 4 friends, then somebody would die and they'd be like, oh, look at this fucking cool ass shit. You know what I mean? But nowadays, it's people mostly just sitting in their fucking living room or their fucking bedroom or their studio fucking apartment or whatever with their $2,000 in rent a month or whatever that they can barely fucking afford. And they have like maybe 2 or 3 friends and they live on the other side of the fucking country or whatever. And they never hang out with anybody. They never go out to bars or, go out to restaurants or whatever the fuck. And they just sit and they have this fucking friendship with somebody. You know what I mean? That will never interact with them outside of you giving them money for like 2 seconds. Like, oh, thank you, chatter. But they don't know you. They don't know anything about you. They'll never learn anything about you. But it's a way to simulate friendships that didn't exist prior. Whereas back in the day, like I said, Let's Plays were actually authentic because they were people, either like 2 or 3 people, or maybe even one person just hanging out, talking about shit in a video game, maybe having some goofy fun. And then you'd be like, oh, that was fun. And then on the weekend, you'd hang out with your friends at like a house party or something. Like it wasn't that involved. Whereas nowadays, Let's Players and streamers have to be fucking everything for everyone at the same time. And it's disturbing. And I don't want to necessarily yuck anyone's yum if that's how you have fun, whatever the fuck. But I think it is deeply alienating. I'm just going to be honest. I think it's very deeply alienating and it's kind of antithetical to the idea of community.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. And one of the things is that I'm not saying that nobody had parasocial relationships with their favorite Let's Players in the salad days, as it were. That would be untrue of me to say. But I think at that time, if you had a Let's Player you liked and you knew they were going to put out something and it was going to be funny and they took their time to play the game well and to edit their video and to film it well, and maybe they actually pre-wrote some of their content, it was more like watching a TV show, right? It was like, oh, Cybershell uploaded a new segment to his Sonic platformer series. It was a thing that he had worked on that I was watching and then I was going to put it aside and I was going to wait for the next one. If I was going to watch, again, like the research indicates Trespasser Let's Play, it was like I was going to sit and watch like a movie, or like Slow Beef playing Harvester, which is a great Let's Play. It's like I'm sitting and watching a movie. I'm getting to experience this game, this weird game that I would never play, and I'm learning about it and I'm getting to see this weird stuff. But I'm not sitting with these videos on constantly just to fill the noise. I'm seeing them because I think the game is interesting and I think that the person is saying things that are insightful and I may be learning something about the medium or something from them. When this streaming thing and the scare cam thing before that came up, it was so baffling to me because I was like, I remember seeing it, and part of this might just be that I'm old, we are old millennials. I would see like a Markiplier video and I'd be like, there's nothing here. He doesn't talk about the game at all. Him and PewDiePie are both, and obviously, like we said, Markiplier is better than Pewds, but he just says catchphrases, they yell. Like, pick a PewDiePie video from 2012 where he's playing Slender. You could replace the video footage of Slender with video footage from any other trendy indie horror game at that time, and it'd be the exact same video and the fan base would respond to it exactly the same because it had nothing to do with the game anymore. And at that point, you may as well just film yourself screaming about, just do your fucking stand-up audition online.
Yeah, watch 2 Girls in 1 Cup reaction video or some shit. You might as well just do that instead. All right, so we talked a little bit before about the Let's Play rules, so I do want to get into them a little bit. I don't know, Brian, you have the comprehensive list of Let's Play rules, but I do want to talk about them a little bit when it comes to the early history of it and how often those were violated. So, do you have the comprehensive list, Brian, or do you want me to just go over a couple of them?
I don't have the list, but I think the actual rules were pretty fluid. Slow Beef tended to kind of a case-by-case enforcement, so like the general rule on something Something Awful is that if you're really, really funny, you can break any rule you want. But the big ones, I think, are, at least for the first iteration of the Something Awful forum rules, are no camcorders. You need to do a capture card. You need to do commentary in post, and you can't talk over cutscenes. I think those are the three big ones that were pretty universal. Like, could not be violated on the LP forums on Something Awful at the time.
No, absolutely. And I think those were all violated literally multiple times immediately the second that it hit YouTube. And I do want to talk a little bit about, obviously, the camcorder one, because of course camcorder LPs should never be allowed. They just look like fucking shit. You don't need to do it. I mean, like I said, capture cards at the time were fairly expensive, but at the same time, it's worth investing in it if you want to do a worthwhile hobby. As I say in my fucking $10 pop microphone that I got on Amazon. But either way, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Like, at the same time, if it's worth doing, you should invest a little bit of time and effort and money into it. And like I said, those camcorder LPs were always bad. And, you know, as I said earlier, DSP was the best one, and he is a horrible Let's Player. So that should tell you something about the quality of camcorder LPs if DSP was the best iteration of it. But I do want to talk a little bit about the not talking over cutscenes thing, because to me, I think that's interesting that that was a mostly hard and fast rule. Because to me, I feel like, and, you know, don't get me wrong, if somebody is talking, you know, over, like 20 people are talking over like a cutscene or whatever, that's annoying. But at the same time, isn't that part of the sort of MS3TK sort of environment of it to a certain extent, or am I wrong about that?
So I think looking back now, that makes sense. At the time, I feel like the logic was that on Something Awful, you're centering the game. You're not doing the me show. Was, you know, that was the thing that I remember Slowbeef used to say. It's when you post a Let's Play in this forum, it's to show off a game for other people that might like the game. And if you comment over footage of yourself playing, you're commenting over a thing that you did, or you're adding some insight to that. But again, if something's really goofy in a cutscene, I'm sure that there were examples that I could remember if I thought about it of people talking over cutscenes to point out something really funny or laughing over them that I'm sure they didn't get probeed on Something Awful for. But generally, at the time, the idea was like you're showing off the game. So when you get to a cutscene, you need to allow it to unfold. You need to let us see the cutscene as what it is. I think that this is one of the ones that looks the weirdest looking back. But at the time, I think it was that if you didn't explicitly tell people don't talk over cutscenes, you were going to get glutted with people trying too hard to be funny and forcing jokes instead of just showing you the scene when it came up. And I think that in that era, it was paramount to a lot of the people on Something Awful to sound so stupid, to retain the integrity of the Let's Play and to make it something that was treating video games as a medium and an art form with like respect, even if they were bad. That doesn't really make sense now, but at the time, I think it was part of a broader set of rules that was like, you should be winning us over as the audience by having interesting things to say about the game. You shouldn't be just using the game as a platform for your own personality.
Okay, fair enough. And, you know, the other one that you said was editing commentary and post, which I feel like is one of those things that basically nobody on YouTube ever followed, which is unfortunate because, like, obviously, you know, it's one of those things where if you have gameplay footage and you think of something funnier, you could edit something funnier after the fact. For example, somebody who did do that, who, you know, isn't really a Let's Player, obviously, but fucking James Rolfe did that, obviously, because he and Mike, and I don't know if there's another contributor, but I know he and Mike obviously did basically all of the capture for their video game footage. They would, you know, fucking record that and then do commentary or jokes or skits over in post, which that's the reason why AVGN is still the king, because he pioneered that in a way that no Let's Player ever really did. And, you know, it's one of those things where I think candid reactions obviously can be funny. I think I mentioned earlier Two Best Friends Play, which I think is still my favorite Let's Play channel ever. I loved that channel, and I think most of what the guys did afterwards, outside of Pat's content, which was really boring in my opinion, but everybody else made really good Let's Play content after that. It was like 3 to 4 really good Let's Players doing that style really well, and in my opinion, arguably the best that anybody's ever done it in that exact style, where it's like, yeah, friends fucking hanging out and joking around, and yeah, talking over cutscenes and stuff. But, you know, they were also one of the few like YouTube Let's Players that Slowbeef and Diabetes actually like knew and were like friendly with.
Yeah.
Because they didn't like most YouTube Let's Players very much, because they did violate most of the rules, and a lot of them weren't very funny or pleasant to talk to.
I think that they liked Best Friends Play because it's right there in the name. So it is a distinctly different thing from a Something Awful style Let's Play. It's friends hanging out. That's the feeling it's evoking. I would say that is almost, even at the time, I probably would have said, well, that's not what I would call a Let's Play. It shows deference for the game also, which is the thing I remember about Best Friends Play. Is it's not like when you watch PewDiePie and the game is literally just a placeholder for them to have something to like riff on or scream at. They like the game. Their live reactions are kind of essential because they're real friends and they have all that real history and that real chemistry. And so their candid reactions are important because they kind of play off each other. So I think that's the reason that it worked. One of the things you'd actually see people sign up to Something Awful to post their Let's Play and do this all the time back in the day. And I think this actually, on YouTube, this was very common. People would doing a traditional style Let's Play where they were trying to play the game and, complete it, but they were doing live commentary. There's a few reasons that doesn't work. First of all, you might just not always have something to say at any given moment. Second of all, if you're just playing the game live and you're not editing it all and you're dying over and over again because you're stuck at a spot, first of all, you should edit that out. Maybe show the first death just to show that it's something is difficult and then edit the rest of that. But also, if you're doing live commentary as you play, you're not going to have anything to say. You're just going to go, died again. I think one of the things that gets mentioned the least by people when they reminisce on this era, but the death of recording your commentary in post, one of the most major signs of decline of like video game content. Because you record your content in post, you have a little more time, like you were saying, Taylor, you can kind of think of something funny, or you can kind of look back at what you play and you can think about what was going on here. What are some things that I could point out about this? And you are like trying to put the most information and the most entertainment value into your commentary. I think that when scare cams, and then again, that led to streaming, became the default, and it was all candid reactions, it was all raging, it was all screaming, or it was all just like chilling with your fans on screen, it fundamentally lost that element of like, we're showing off a cool, interesting game. And it became, just like another platform. And a lot of those people that would have been doing scare cams in 2011, 2012, in 2019, 2018, they were making, YouTuber rap songs. Because there's a certain group of people who they aren't really interested in anything except for being an online social media personality. And so they'll do whatever the thing is. And for a long time, that thing was streaming video games.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It was people who, saw an opportunity to get into a space that they had no history in and just make content over it. And, obviously for a lot of those people, it didn't turn out, but it turned off to be a springboard for something much bigger. And, I know I keep talking about like Markiplier and stuff, and now he's a fucking like actor and he directed a fairly successful movie that came out back in fucking January and stuff like that. And, PewDiePie is somebody who now makes literally just regular wholesome content, which is once again crazy knowing his history and very poor levels of humor that even like teenage boys would cringe at nowadays. But, either way, and, talk about obviously I don't know quite this counts as Let's Plays, but obviously talking about, video game content put out on the internet, right? Like people who played extremely mainstream first-person shooter content, like people who played Halo or Call of Duty, or people who played those really specific, like first-person shooter, very popular, Avenged Sevenfold, Mountain Dew, Doritos type fucking video games, you know what I mean? And like, obviously those people 201 ended up being like toxic losers who, and some of them committed actual crimes that they're in prison for. But, at the same time, like there's certainly an element of that where like it was people commentating over something that a lot of people had a connection to or a history to. And, a lot of those people were some of the first people to also use capture cards and not do camcorder stuff. But of course, a lot of them also did camcorder stuff. But I think ultimately what this leads to in our, discussion about at least the early history of Let's Plays, and this isn't necessarily my final thoughts, but something that I do really want to mention, right, is that just like with everything else on the internet, that became like a massive phenomena. This all started out with fucking regular people and, just being honest, a lot of nerds on the internet making a creative hobby that turned into this giant multimedia, just international, multi-million, maybe even billion-dollar fucking industry at this fucking point that anybody in their literal grandma can do from home. Started off with a couple people on Something Awful 20 fucking years ago doing as a creative project when they were in school. And I think that's pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah, it is really cool. So this is a thing that I have some very deep nostalgia for. I love being in my 30s. My 20s were, really good a lot of the time, but they were not good a lot of the time. My teenage years were not good. My 30s have been pretty good. But when I think about this era of like Something Awful and even other parts of Something Awful, whether if it's FYID or whatever, or like Helldump, but especially when I think about like the time that I was on the Let's Play boards and when I was waiting for all these new Red Super content and I had my list of guys that I was always waiting for their new video to drop, I feel a deep sense of like the passage of time for that, as silly as that is, because that is a thing that for a moment was pretty popular online. It was weird. There was a moment where, something off of Let's Plays are really niche. And then for a while, from like 2010 to 2012 or 2013, they're kind of inching towards being mainstream. Like Retro Play was like pretty popular at the time. But then just as those guys were starting to get more popular, the scare cam thing comes and that blows it out of the water. And that completely shifts the demographic. One of the things too I'll reiterate this for anyone looking for a starter. The Retro Play YouTube channel is still up. One thing is that I revisit some of those videos probably a couple times a year, and they're still funny to me. But one thing has struck me: the landscape of video game content online has changed so much. It's been almost 15 years that if I showed some of these Retro Play videos where they're making fun of someone to a younger person, they actually might not understand why they're making fun of them, because there's so much more of that content now. Like the rules, or even just the mentality that I thought was taken as a given, that if you're putting something online, you should want it to be good. It's so different now. I almost feel like, and not just the Let's Play things, but even just Let's Plays from now on, whether it's a camcorder Let's Play or it's a Proton John one of him doing a Mario ROM hack, those are all kind of frozen in amber. Do you remember Mario ROM hacks? That was so popular online. Who the fuck is playing Mario ROM hacks now?
Well, talk about people who are playing Mario ROM hacks. I remember Nintendo made a Mario ROM hacks fucking video game a while ago, and then by the time they got to it, nobody gave a shit about Mario ROM hacks anymore, so like nobody fucking played it. They did it like 10 years after that like genre's peak, and it's like, wow, Nintendo, fucking finger on the pulse over here. Jesus Christ.
I mean, it was a fun game. I'm glad they made it, but they should have made that in like 2007, 2008.
Oh, absolutely. Or like, I Want to Be the Guy, or those other like infamously hard video games that were literally not made for any kind of like interesting gameplay or really it was just made as frustration simulators. And those are by far my least favorite kind of video games. Well, and I don't necessarily want to get on my soapbox too quick, but I do have a quick digression. That's why all these like mods and stuff for various video games, and people, if they want to have fun with it, sure, whatever. But like, I hate when there's like, especially like Resident Evil, which is a really big tendency for this, but they'll come out with like Madhouse times 12, and there's like 15 different chainsaw guys coming after you. It's like, but the game wasn't made for that. The game was literally tailored, no pun intended, on my own name, but tailored to have these specific incidences and these specific things. So when you take a like boss enemy and put him in like a random hallway, it completely ruins the flow of the video game. Like, what's the appeal of that? I genuinely don't understand the appeal of why people play that kind of bullshit, because you're just taking something that was never meant for that level of difficulty and doing it so you die 100 times, then be like, I fucking died 100. It's like, yeah, that's why they didn't fucking do it in the original game. Stop being a fucking retard about it. And like, in the same way that like, for example, like Dark Souls and those kind of fucking bullshit video games put, once again, sections in games that there's no reason why an enemy should ever be in that section, then you die 500 times. Like, what is the appeal of that? I genuinely don't fucking understand.
So, with something like the Souls games, I think that the sense of satisfaction you get out of it, it's kind of harkens, I think, when I played Demon Souls, it sort of reminded me of being a little kid and playing like Contra, which when you're a little kid is like a really hard game. And it's this thing where it's trial and error, and it's kind of like gradually getting closer and closer to figuring out how to get this piece. I think the Souls games are reasonably fair in a way that like, so the thing with the shitty ROM hacks or the shitty indie games.
And I want to be clear, I was just using Dark Souls as the most famous mainstream example, but those are by far the best version of that, but I still personally don't like it. But it's way better than the thing I was just talking about with like the shitty ROM hacks type stuff, to be honest.
Well, since we're here, I actually didn't strike me as one of the more important ones for our discussion, but if you were posting a Let's Play of like a famously hard game like Super Meat Boy, or I Want to Be the Guy, or Super Mario Kaizen, like doing a Let's Play of that on Something Awful forums, you need to be great at it. That's the only way that you're allowed to post that kind of Let's Plays. You need to be doing a no death run, no cuts, where you play it really, really well. Because otherwise you're just posting yourself dying over and over and you have nothing to say about it. Kind of a bugaboo of Slow Beefs as well at the time. So I think he hated that shit.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of those things that it should really just be really a no-brainer, but obviously the angry react, the base angry react we talked about earlier was the appeal of that, which it was never funny. I mean, you don't want to talk about somebody, we're talking about ABGN and how he did a lot of Let's Play rules, but did it in the way of actually making video content. Somebody who did a very infamously bad Let's Play who, had a obviously ironic and jokey rivalry with ABGN was Nostalgia Critic in his famous Bart's Nightmare LP. I would argue to this day, probably the worst actual Let's Play ever. Like, genuinely speaking, not like a camcorder bullshit made by a 12-year-old in his bedroom, like an actual LP made by a professional, quote-unquote, professional content creator on the internet. I still think that's the worst Let's Play of all time. It breaks almost every good, like, fucking Let's Play rule rule outside of the camcorder thing.
It breaks every rule. As you alluded to, Doug Walker should have known better. But the other thing I think that rubbed people the wrong way, it's an obnoxious review, but it's also that Walker, say what you will about him, he pisses me off. I think he has bad takes a lot. He's also done some shady shit, but he understands a certain type of movie, right? He understands what makes a certain type of movie work. It seems pretty obvious to me that he saw Let's Plays popping off on YouTube, and it was just like someone with almost no interest in playing video games. And he was just like, oh, I could do that. And he just yells at the screen. I think that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths that were into Let's Play at the time. But so it did just seem like he came in opportunistically and didn't really take the time to look at any popular videos or, figure out what it was about. And he yells the whole time. It's so fucking grating.
I know especially how much you love the Doug scream. He does the Doug scream every 2 seconds.
He never stops.
It is fucking garbage. And obviously, we could talk about more infamous Let's Players, because of course it was such a ubiquitous genre in the internet. There's many people who made Let's Plays who literally became like the most vile internet figures ever. But like if we're talking about the most infamous actual Let's Plays themselves, Bart's Nightmare has to be the most infamous Let's Play, at least in my opinion. Like just universally reviled. Doug Walker, I think objectively, just like along with the most infamous fucking movie and album review of all time, just such an infamous internet figure in every way. But no, either way. So, we've been recording for quite a while at this point. So I'm about ready to get to my final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts as well, Brian? Or do you have any other things you want to bring up before we get to our final thoughts?
So I think I've hit all of my retrospective points. Let's Play started out as there's a whole different set of standards for it. It was, at least in the clique of where it started and the people that I was watching, quality control was really emphasized. Creativity was really valued, and taking time and making quality was really valued. But at the same time, and I am going to recommend some things to people who might be interested. It's hard for me to recommend these to someone who has never known this era of Let's Play, because you're going to have a completely different history and context for what it is to play video games on the internet than I did. What I will say, though, is most of the really good classic Something Awful, there's a ton of great Something Awful Let's Plays that were only ever on Something Awful. That a lot of them are probably lost to the sands of time. Even if they're not, you need to pay your $10 to see them, because you got to pay to read Something Awful and to post on there. But I did check the YouTuber Research Indicates, as I've alluded to, did his Jurassic Park Trespasser Let's Play. That is still on YouTube. It's fantastic. Even if you think you have no interest in watching someone play video games, the way he formats it is like, it's a very weird game, and he does it kind of like he's doing a nature documentary. He's picked a game not a lot of people know about that's very strange, and he's very charismatic and insightful talking about it. Cybershell did Let's Plays of all of the original platforming, Sonic the Hedgehog games. He put a lot of effort into them. He took this game series that is pretty straightforward, and you'd think there wouldn't be a lot to say about it, and did character breakdowns for every badnik in it. He did like map outs of all the level designs. He also says a lot of homophobic slurs. He has since apologized for. So if you're going to watch some Cybershell Sonic the Hedgehog platforming LPs, just be prepared for that. But probably the best thing that I would say to look at is Retsupre, which again, the Retsupre channel has been inactive for almost 10 years now, but it is still on YouTube. Playlist with all of their podcasts, which that was the first podcast I ever listened to. And there's some really great, especially in the first 10 or so episodes, a lot of early Let's Play history that they get into in there. And they have a playlist called RPing the LPs. It's massive, but the videos in there are mostly about 10 minutes or less. And it's just them riffing on bad Let's Plays. I think that might be, if you wanted to understand the culture clash within Let's Play of this time, it's all right there. You're going to see some of the worst videos you've ever seen. And I'm going to be honest, this is maybe me showing my age and my bias. Some of the funniest people to ever post online, making fun of some of the worst videos you've ever seen. If this is even as a historical curiosity to you, I would say, check out Research Indicates Jurassic Park Let's Play, and then the Retsupre RPing the LPs playlist. Just watch a couple videos from that. If you're a younger person, I don't think you'll get the same effect that I do from it, because again, you have your own history and conception of these things. But if nothing else, it'll be interesting. If you have an interest in video games and the internet and the relationship between the two, it should be of interest.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like, as we talked about with some of the early sort of essay, Retsupre adjacent Let's Players, I would definitely say that the early ones, definitely you said Research Indicates and stuff like that. And as I mentioned earlier, Two Best Friends Play, and some of those early Let's Players really do stand the test of time. But I would say otherwise, almost every Let's Player from back then, their actual content, I would say you can safely ignore. This is the second episode now where like there was an early internet content content mill with creepypasta and now Let's Play. Like, some of that stuff holds up really well, but the vast majority of it does not really hold up well. So there's no real reason to watch almost any of it, especially, yeah, as you said, the like scare cam people and the, very base commentary people and stuff like that. There's no real reason to watch that type of stuff. But, at the same time, like I said, there's always diamonds in the rough. And I would say that's definitely the best place to, go back and watch that content. And, just in general, as we talked about with the early history of it, even with its growing pains and even during the salad days and the dark era of every genre and everything, there's good and bad of everything. So it's good to take the good with the bad and leave a lot of that shit back into your childhood. Because, as we've said on many episodes now, you'll never be 17 again. You'll never be watching this content for the first time. It's not probably going to hit just as well for you as it did back then. And if you're 35 and, if you watch a PewDiePie scare cam fucking Let's Play and you have the same reaction you did when you were 16 or 17, I would wonder what's wrong with you. If I'm being honest, I would be like, why do you still look positively on this?
Because to be honest, like I said, I revisit some awful Let's Players and Retro Play videos occasionally, and it's kind of a nostalgic thing. I feel kind of wistful about it, and I still think they're pretty funny, but I definitely don't react to them the same way now as I did then, where I was like, oh my god, this is the funniest, smartest, most like critically engaging thing I've seen online right now. It doesn't hit me that way because so much has changed since then. It's even the good stuff, even stuff like research indicates, who again, the Trespasser LP, maybe the best Let's Play of all time. It's still, you're going to watch it and be acutely aware that it is from a bygone era.
No, absolutely. So I think that really capstones our early history of Let's Play topics. So let's get into our pluggables. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both our YouTube and Spotify channels, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And as well, I have a personal finance YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram channel that eventually I will upload content. I am currently working on scripts right now and coming up with ideas on where and how to film those various things, but it is very much a work in progress. Now it is technically summer as of recording, but these last few months have been very busy for me in a fun way, but been very busy for me in regards to my personal life and having fun. But one of these days, like I said, I will get back on the grind and start making content for that. So feel free to look out for those. Once again, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram channel content. Of course, Instagram and TikTok will focus on the short form and the YouTube will focus on the long form. But either way, look out for that content because that will be coming very, very shortly. And, as well as we have mentioned many, many times on the show, the Lucifer and the Father crowdfund, of course, our good friends Scott, Shaw, and Robert are creating a fantastic series. Last time I checked, they are still in post-production for episodes 2 and 3 and beyond, but, feel free to donate to their GoFundMe and their crowdfunds today. They're small-time creators just like us who have a dream, who have a very specific vision for what they want their content to be, and who want to support them as best they can because, as we've said, Scott, Shaw, and Robert have been great friends of our show, and we think they're really cool guys, so please support them.
Talking with Scott a bit today, just today, Scott has gotten word, he was talking with Sean, and they've assessed that editing of the second Lucifer and the Father is just about finished. They are entering the process of submitting it to film festivals and looking into distribution now. Looks like, for the most part, it appears that they are out of post-production now.
That is absolutely fantastic to hear, because this is something that has been literally months and months and months in the making, so it's really great that they're nearing completion on that. And, as we say with the crowdfund every episode, just send us a YouTube comment, send us an email, just showing us you donated, and we will, within good reason, match those donations because we want, and to be clear, once again, it's 10, 15, 20 bucks per donation, but we want Scott, Shaw, and Robert's dreams to become a reality. And speaking of people's dreams who want to become a reality, but had a bit of a hindrance at the moment, but Luigi Mangione. Last time we, looked back into him, he had a really good outlook, but recently it seems like his defense team are kind of thrown in the towel, and I really don't know why, to be clear to the audience who may not know, because this has just been an update in between recording of episodes that we had now, but apparently his defense team are planning on going with the momentary lapse of reason defense when it comes to the crime that he once again did not commit. So very baffling why they would go down this direction, because not only, of course, is Luigi innocent of all charges, but at the same time, this strategy literally never works. It literally doesn't fucking work, especially somebody who was as politically and monetarily powerful as Brian Thompson. There's no way they would ever allow a mitigating factor like that to allow him to be anything other than tortured in a mental health facility for the rest of his life if this worked, which once again, this will not work. This is a horrible strategy.
Luigi is absolutely not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. All of the sources indicate that his rights were violated, that he was unlawfully searched and seized. I think this is a terrible idea. I guess maybe the defense knows something that we don't. I mean, probably, hopefully they know something we don't. But I mean, I don't see it. We've all been following this case for so long, and it just looks like the prosecution, the arresting officers have fumbled so many elements of this. There is so much space for Luigi there. It is so plain to look at everything that we have in this case, and it's been so publicized, and say there is every reason to believe that this guy's not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Going with any sort of momentary lapse of reason plea is, I don't understand it. Of course, we love Luigi. We will continue to give him all of our support. I find this really baffling.
Yes, absolutely baffling, terrible idea. But either way, we still need to support Luigi when it comes to, word of mouth online, financially, rhetorically, however you want to send him support. Once again, you can send him a letter. You can say nice things about him online, or if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. And what we just said was not a negative thing about Luigi specifically. It was about his defense team, which I feel like made a pretty critical error in this moment.
Yes.
But at the same time, we will definitely see where this goes. But yeah, I just don't see that strategy really playing out at all, because it never plays out. And even if it did play out and he was found not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt when it comes to, not guilty by reason of insanity, he would just get tortured in a mental health facility for the rest of his fucking life. That's all that would happen. For somebody who seemingly is not that fucking mentally ill, so they would just put a sane person in a mental health facility for the next 50 fucking years of their life. I mean, Jesus Christ, what a horror show. In fact, in some ways that would probably be worse than prison, if we're being honest. In almost every conceivable way, it's worse than being in a prison, because at least in jail, Luigi is respected in jail, whereas in a mental health facility, you'll be disrespected by everybody, straight up. It's a bad idea. So we are very concerned. But either way, like I said, just like with the Lucifer and the Father crowdfund, just send us an email, send us a YouTube comment, and we will, within good reason, about 10, 15, 20 bucks, match those donations to his defense fund. Because even though things are a little dire at the moment, we still want Luigi to have the best possible trial. And speaking of people who come up with various scenarios where their lives are just fucking falling apart all the time that have nothing to do really with them at all, we have a Patreon page. At the moment we don't have any patrons, but become our first patron today. We have great tiers like the $5 tier, which is one we always advertise, where you get every episode up to 48 hours early, because we always say the first 48 hours are the most important. As we always say, when you're talking with your normie coworker and you're talking about Let's Plays and you're just like, hey, there's this really interesting Let's Play from like 20 years ago where a guy reviews a really forgotten, super shitty video game. It was a Jurassic Park game, actually, and the guy has really interesting commentary over it and treats it almost like a cinematic experience. And the guy will be like, oh yeah, I love Let's Plays. I love it when guys like yell rape threats at random people online when playing video games and stuff. I think that's really funny and really cool. And you'll be like, wow, that's awesome. Thanks for that insight. I'm really glad I talked to you about this.
And then you can reach out to them. You show them some Retro Prey. You show them this podcast. And you know what? You turn them around. And you know what? They're a woke dirtbag leftist.
No, absolutely. So, just like with everything when it comes to our crowdfunds and Patreon shoutouts, please become a patron of ours today. And then, Brian, do you have any pluggables as well?
You can follow the podcast, that's Millennials Are Old, on Facebook at the Facebook page Millennials Are Old. Also, Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and Threads. That remains the best way to reach out to me regarding the podcast. If you love PewDiePie, if you hate something awful because they were mean to Freeze in 2004, and you would like to push back on some of our statements, if you want to shout the R word at me and call me a barrel, if you feel like I'm just ruining your fun by saying that certain Let's Plays are bad because I'm gatekeeping and we're being Let's Play fascists, which is a real thing that Retro Play is called, that's the best way to reach us. Millennials Are Old Pod, Instagram and Threads. You can also find me, my personal page, JLo Biafra, again on Instagram or Threads. It's a millennial pun name. As I think I said the last couple of weeks, I've got some stuff that adjacent to some of the subjects on the podcast, just essays and things that I'm writing. I'm going to be starting either getting back on Medium or maybe I'll start a Substack. We'll see. If anyone likes the podcast, it should be of interest. It's a lot of the same subjects, a lot of the same themes. Just like writing them in text kind of allows me to get a little bit more into the weeds as opposed to like a back and forth overview. I can really sit with something and kind of get into like the nitty gritty of it on certain subjects. So once I've decided what medium I'm going to be posting that on, I will share it along here.
No, absolutely. And, just like talk about Let's Plays, right, Brian? I want to Let's Play in my bed in my sleep because I'm fucking exhausted.
I want to be the guy who's in bed sleeping.
No, absolutely. So have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight, and please don't make scare cam Let's Plays in your sleep. So have a good night,
because they'll scare me and I won't be able to sleep.
Oh, absolutely. I'm still scared from the last episode when those creepypasta demons fucking fought me in my fucking living room at the end of the recording. Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm still seeing him every night.
Have a good night, everybody.